Hello, Four Star Nation, and welcome back to a special day interview, last interview of the weekend for us here on the Four Star Nation. But college basketball is March, people. Today's March 6th. College basketball reaching its pinnacle point of the March Madness NCAA tournament. Today we have commercial appeals, Mr. Mark Gianotto, back on this again. Mark, thank you very much for being on with us, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me back.
Mark, when you look at college basketball and specifically the Memphis, Tennessee area, obviously the Memphis Tigers have fought back and made a nice little run, and they still control on destiny. Mark, the game tomorrow on CBS against Houston is what I think probably one of the biggest games in school history. Would you say it's that big for this team right now?
I don't know about biggest game in school history just because there's, the Final Four runs, things like that. Postseason games are big, but it
Yeah.
certainly seems like the biggest regular season game in a long time for Memphis basketball just because of the opponent, because of the stakes, because it's become, I'm not saying, I don't know if they win and they're in the NCAA tournament, but it sure seems like win and they're in a really good position to make the NCAA tournament. And then if they lose, I think they have to win the conference tournament to win the NCAA tournament. And so I think it's like a confluence of things, and in part because Memphis hasn't been to the NCAA tournament since 2014. I mean, and that you want to end this drought,
Right.
and they've put themselves in a pretty decent spot here after a bad start to the season, where now, I mean, you could make the argument they're one of, if not the hottest teams in the country, having won 9 of 10 coming into this big game at Houston tomorrow. So I would phrase like that. It feels like the biggest regular season game in a while for Memphis basketball.
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase what I said. One of the biggest regular season
Yeah.
games in recent program history. I'll put it that way. There's something about these Sunday CBS games for the University of Memphis. We don't win them, Mark. And I'm sure we're gonna wear those black jerseys that I just despise. But when we talk about Houston, of course, their head basketball coach Kelvin Sampson, as we know, great basketball coach. John's a big Kelvin Sampson fan as well. Talk a little bit about this Houston team, and then after that, John, you can get into your questions.
Well, Kelvin is, he is a great coach. I mean, you go back, he took Oklahoma to the Final Four once upon a time. He was the coach at Indiana. They were, got Eric Gordon at Indiana, and then obviously left after he got in trouble with the NCAA there, although what he did at Indiana is technically legal now. He got in trouble at Indiana for impermissible phone calls and text messages, and you're allowed, the stuff he did, it's legal now. But then, at Houston, the way this is the best Houston's been as a basketball program since the Phi Slamma Jamma era. And it's a credit to him and his, he's got this formula. He knows what type of players he wants. It's not like he's going out and getting 5-star recruits. I mean, Quentin Grimes, their best player, was a 5-star recruit, but he started at Kansas and transferred in. But they play this tough, gritty style, play good defense, and they know who they are. And they're the type of team that they're not unbeatable, but they're not going to go they're not going to go hand you the game. You got to go beat them to beat Houston because they're tough, they're rugged, they rebound, they play good defense. And if they're the type of team that if any sort of shots are falling, they're really hard to beat because they're really good at everything else. And this team this year, I mean, you've got Quentin Grimes, who I think is going to be a barometer for how this game goes, because if you look at when Houston has struggled this year or lost, Quentin Grimes has not gotten going. And if you look at the game Memphis and Houston played last year in Houston. Memphis led at halftime when Quentin Grimes was pretty quiet in the first half. And then in the second half, Quentin Grimes took over the game and was dominant. And they ended up winning by 7. But they've got him. They've got Marcus Sasser, who's a good shooter in the backcourt for them. And they got this guy, Justin Gorham, who's really emerged this year since Caleb Mills, who was the preseason AAC Player of the Year. Caleb Mills announced he was transferring. And this Justin Gorham guy has stepped up. And then recently they got Fabian White, their best big man, who tore his ACL last May. They recently got him back. And so that has kind of that. If there's a weak spot on this team, Houston, it's inside, because Fabian White, even though he's back, is he tore his ACL in May. He's not the Fabian White yet that he was before. And so they're a good team. And Kelvin Sampson, I'm just straight up, is the best coach in the AAC. He just is right now. And he knows what works. And these guys play hard for him. And they don't lose at home very often. They've lost since the Fertitta Center opened 3 years ago. They've lost one AAC game at home. So it's going to be a tough task because – and they've won 24 straight at home as well, dating back to last season. So this would be like, if we're just being perfectly honest, this would be one of the not just a great win for Memphis. I think it'd be one of the great wins any college basketball team has gotten this year, because Houston's number 5 in the net and they don't lose at home. So that's why I think this will ultimately get Memphis in the tournament if they can pull it off, because the teams they're going to be competing with on the bubble, if Memphis can have this win in its pocket at Houston, I just don't see many bubble teams having this type of win on their resume. And so I think that's really going to help Memphis come Selection Sunday. But it's a big if at this point, because again, to beat Houston, you got to go beat them. They're not going to hand you the win. So Memphis is going to have to play its best game of the season Sunday.
All right, Mark Gianotto. Mark Gianotto joins us from 92.9, also 92.9 ESPN Radio. Shout out to the guys over there as well, Gianotto and Jeffrey's show. So we want to advertise you a little bit on that radio show as well, Mark. Mark, I think the breaking news happened during y'all's show last week regarding the scheduling, regarding what the commissioner did and whatnot as well.
Or what he didn't do.
Or what he didn't do.
Yeah.
Can you give our fans a little bit more background on what really went down, like regarding scheduling and whatnot on that? I know they agreed to everything beforehand before the season started, but now there's a report out there last week. Didn't we were going to play like Wichita State also, and then we decided not to? Or what's really going on regarding that?
So here's what happened. So they did the athletic directors in the AAC agreed before the season that if a team had to postpone a game because of COVID and the game couldn't get rescheduled, the team that didn't have COVID in that situation, so the team that wasn't at fault for the game being postponed, if the game couldn't be rescheduled, that team that didn't have COVID was given the option to turn, if it was a road game, they could turn it into a home game. And the athletic directors agreed to that. So take that to one side. So obviously Memphis went on that 19-day pause that ended, I guess now a week and a half ago. And among the games that got postponed because of Memphis's COVID pause were at Houston and at Wichita State, which are obviously very important games. And Penny made it clear when they came back from the pause that he wanted to play both games if he could. He wanted to play at Wichita State and at Houston because both games could help Memphis's resume. But it became clear the league wasn't to do that in the short amount of time they had. The league would have had to cancel, like the Memphis Tulane game or the Memphis USF game. And I would have done that personally, but the league decided they were not going to do something like that. Like they're willing to reschedule the games, but they weren't going to cancel another team's games in order to fit the games in. So what happened was there was I know for a fact there was a tentative agreement of some kind for Memphis to play this second Memphis Houston game to happen. And I know this because we were alerted, I'll just say by like league officials, that, hey, there's going to be an announcement in about 45 minutes about the Memphis Houston game getting rescheduled. And then we got notified about a half hour later, 15 minutes before the announcement was going to happen. It's on hold. Like, don't publish anything yet, because something's happened. And so in that moment, though, it appeared, we were told that they were going to move the Memphis USF game up a day, which is what they did do, and that the Memphis at Houston game was going to be played like this past Thursday, and then Memphis and Houston would play at FedEx Forum tomorrow, as was originally scheduled. So that was then put on pause. And then, from our sources, what we were told was the reason it got put on hold, the reason why they didn't go forward with the announcement, is whether it was Kelvin Sampson or just people at Houston, they stepped in and went, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, we don't know if this is the best for us. And the league listened, and then it became just a tug of war between influence. And what we were told, and what Kelvin Sampson confirmed yesterday when he spoke to the media about this for the first time, is basically Houston's Kelvin Sampson. This wasn't I actually believe Kelvin in the sense that this wasn't about ducking a game as we normally think of ducking a game. Kelvin is, from what I was told, Kelvin Sampson is, he thinks it's really important to win conference championships, like regular season titles, and hang a banner. And he was annoyed at the fact that right now Wichita State is in first place in the AAC at 9-2. And so they've played, or I guess they're 10-2 now, but they've played a couple, two fewer games than Memphis in league, and they've played 4 fewer games than Houston in league. And largely, and they've only played among those top 4 in the league, Memphis, Houston, Wichita State, and SMU. Wichita's only played Memphis once and Houston twice. They haven't played SMU at all because of SMU's COVID issues. And I should bring that up. I think SMU's COVID issues also complicated things, because I think the league expected SMU to come off COVID pause this week, and then they got another positive test. And so that kind of messed things up, because I think they were going to do is they were going to have SMU play Wichita on Thursday, and Memphis was going to play Houston on Thursday. Like, I think that's how it was going to work out. But because SMU couldn't get off COVID pause because they had another positive test, like they still haven't played. And so Kelvin Sampson basically said, this is not fair that, Wichita's, if anyone should have to reschedule a game against Memphis, it should be Wichita State, because they've played 4 fewer games than us. And I think it's a reasonable, I guess, argument. But my whole point during this entire process has been, Mike Oresco, the AAC commissioner, went on the record and said, we are going to attempt to help our bubble teams in terms of rescheduling. And the bubble teams are Memphis, Wichita State, and SMU. Because SMU can't get off pause, I don't really think they have a viable at-large case anymore, because they can't get off pause. Like, hopefully they'll be able to play in the conference tournament next week. Wichita State, if you look at their resume, they have a win over Houston, but their resume isn't as good as Memphis's, like in terms of the computer metrics and things like that. But ultimately, like, this isn't Memphis versus Houston. It should be, the way it should have been is, how can we help the bubble teams the most? And the way to help Memphis, who has the best bubble case of anyone in the AAC, of the bubble teams, the best way to help Memphis was to play 2 Houston games, give them 2 shots at Houston. And I just didn't understand. Like, in the moment, I was like, I can't believe, what Kelvin Sampson Houston doing is ridiculous. But over time, I've accepted the fact that, they're looking out for their best interests, and that is what it is. What should happen is, instead of just allowing the inmates to run the asylum, so like just basically letting Houston dictate what happens, and then even after that, because what happened after Houston refused to play Memphis is the league was like, okay, we'll put Memphis with Wichita State on Thursday. And at that point, Memphis was like, so you want us, so after Kelvin Sampson flipped our home game to a road game, you want us to add another road game to the schedule. So we're going to have to play 4 straight road games. And the reality is, even if you add the Wichita State game, if Memphis doesn't beat Houston, they're not going to make the tournament as an at-large. Like they have to beat Houston, not Wichita State. And so Memphis basically said, you know what, we're going to do the same thing Houston just did. It wasn't like Wichita State is framed, like Wichita State feels the same way about Memphis as Memphis feels about Houston. And ultimately, I think neither Memphis nor Houston should have been able to just say, no, we're not going to play. The league should have stepped in and said, this is what's going to happen. And if you don't like it, tough. Like, this is what we think's in the best interest of the league. And that's what they should have done. But, Oresco, basically, tried to he didn't want to put his foot down, I guess. I don't know. I just think the league in general handled this really poorly. And if you look at it just in COVID in general, the AAC is having way more issues with COVID than any other big conference in the country. I think Taylor Eldridge of the Wichita Eagle did this study. Like, when all said and done, the AAC is going to end up playing something like 73% of its scheduled conference games. That's easily the lowest percentage out of the other 6 big leagues. Like, I think the Big East is going to play 83% of its games. And then the other, like the Power 5, for the most part, all played more than 90% of their conference games. So I just think it was a big cluster with the AA. Like, the AAC just kind of, it's probably some of it's just bad luck with COVID. Like there's some of it's out of their control. But the stuff they could control, it felt like they mismanaged pretty badly. And so it's left. And, honestly, Memphis and Wichita State are the ones who ended up getting screwed after Mike Oresco came out and said, we're going to try to do what's best for our bubble teams. Well, they basically did the opposite. They did the worst for their bubble teams in this situation. And so it is what it is now. I mean, it's, you play the hand you're dealt if you're Memphis. And like I said, if you can win at Houston, see, my dog is even upset about this. Hates arrest now.
Yeah, get him.
When I say all that about the league, like, I actually find the league, I know like some Memphis fans think like they complain about officiating. They think the AAC officiating is horrible and it's not great. But like in general, I actually have found the league office to be usually like pretty competent. But in this case, they really dropped the ball, I thought.
Favoritism.
Yeah.
Mark, let me ask you this. Exactly. It is what it is. You got to play the hand you're dealt. At the end of the day, if you're Memphis, you got to beat Houston tomorrow. If you really want to make a legitimate case to be a NCAA tournament team, and I think they are a NCAA tournament team. I think they're that talented. And I think this year, after that COVID break, them coming out like gangbusters, just whipping everybody's butt. I mean, they're playing with a total different passion that I love to see. That's been there the whole time. I think Musa, just how he's been getting in more and more and more involved as the season's gone on, has been huge for this team. But Mark, this will be my last question. But let me ask you this, man: is this Penny's biggest game to date as a head coach in Memphis?
He says it isn't. He was asked that yesterday when he talked to the press, and he still thinks. He still thinks the Tennessee game last year is the biggest game of his career. But I have a column up at commercialappeal.com. He's wrong. This is the biggest game of his career. Like, there's no doubt. Like that. Ultimately, I get it why that Tennessee game was big, because it's a rivalry. At the time, both teams were ranked. And then you also had the buildup with, Penny versus Rick Barnes, or the back and forth, the war of words, if you will, that they had over the course of years. So I get it why he thought that was an important game, because he had kind of stuck his chest out ahead of time, Penny had, and he wanted to win it. But ultimately, that Tennessee team finished 17-14, and that game was in December. No, I think this is the biggest game because I personally think, I think Penny has done a heck of a job turning this thing around this season. We should acknowledge the first 11 games. I don't think he did a very good job, but the last 10 games, the way, to the improvement this team's made over the course of the season, that is the sign of someone of a great coaching job, what they've been able to do. And I think Penny has done a great job. And I think locally people are acknowledging that listen, this whole oh, Penny, he's just an AAU guy. It's nonsense. He's a good coach. He knows what he's doing for the most part. Does he make mistakes? Yeah. But every coach makes mistakes. Coach K makes mistakes, exactly. Tom Izzo makes mistakes. It just happens. You're not going to be perfect. But I think he's shown, I think people around here kind of know, you know what? He knows what he's doing. I don't know if he's ultimately going to achieve what he wants to achieve, but he knows what he's doing. But I do think the perception nationally of this program right now is still kind of, well, the results haven't really matched the hype, And I think this game tomorrow, you win this game and therefore setting yourself up to make the tournament, I think that can really change the narrative nationally, if you will, because there's going to be a lot of people watching this game on CBS.
Very true.
And if you come out and you can knock off Houston, and like I said, this would be one of the best wins any team in the country gets this year. What Houston's number 5 in the net. And if you look at it, who's had a better win? Illinois at Michigan the other night, that was probably a better win, winning at Michigan by 20. Yeah. I think Indiana beat Iowa on the road at one point this year. That was a good win. Mm-hmm. The Baylor loss when they came back from COVID pause, although there was some obviously rust involved in that. But this would just give just not just a huge win for Memphis, but just a huge one of the biggest wins of the year anyone would get in college basketball. And I think people nationally would have to take notice. And it would be the clear sign that Penny is making progress and Penny's on his way at Memphis. Because ultimately this is college basketball is a postseason sport. You're judged on, did you make the NCAA tournament and how far did you go? That is ultimately how everyone is judged in college basketball. And so it's important for Penny to make the NCAA tournament. It has been since the beginning of the year. And here's his chance. They've got, it's not going to be easy, but I bet you if you ask Penny, back in December when they were struggling, hey, you're going to get to the end of the year and you're going to play at Houston. And if you win, you're probably going to make the tournament. You lose, you're going to have to win the conference tournament to make it. I think he'd take that, especially where they were in December. I think he'd take that 10 times, 7 days a week. So they're in a decent spot where, like you said, Wes, they control this. They can go, it's going to be hard, but all they got to do is win Sunday and maybe, avoid, if they win Sunday and then avoid getting upset in the quarterfinals of the AAC tournament, I think they got a really good shot at making the tournament, regardless of what happens in the AAC tournament semifinals. Just to win this game and then avoid a bad loss in the AAC tournament.
Good point. Yeah. All right, Mark, I got a question. You did an article a few weeks ago now regarding Melissa's retirement.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I want to give our fans a little bit more insight on what's really going on. I mean, the women's basketball coach Melissa McFerrin retired from her head coaching job at the University of Memphis women's basketball at the helm at the Memphis women's basketball. So, can you give us any insight on that in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate. The retirement thing was a little, it was raised eyebrows because the season wasn't over. She was in the final year of her contract. I'm going to be honest, she probably wasn't going to be retained. She probably shouldn't have been retained 2 years ago, to be quite honest. But I don't want to speculate. I have not been able to lock in on exactly why she decided to do this. I do think retirement is being very that's a very, to steal a phrase from my radio show, that's a very tell your story, not the story reason for stepping aside. But I think it's good for the women's basketball program. I mean, they were stuck in the mud with her. They hadn't been good in years. They haven't been good basically since they went to the AAC. Maybe 1 year they had a decent team. Right. And I just think there's, in the AAC, if South Florida has a consistently good women's basketball program right now, and they do it by recruiting internationally. But my feeling is if USF can have a consistently good women's basketball program, so can Memphis. It can't be that difficult, exactly. And there's a lot of girls basketball talent around here in the region. You just need and it sounds like, to her credit, Melissa was recruiting decently well towards the end, but it has not translated into results for the program. And so I'm just happy that they're finally moving on to a new era, and whoever they end up hiring, frankly, can't be much worse than Melissa McFerrin was the past 5 years or so. So hopefully, I just want to see them have at least a competitive women's basketball program. It seems like it doesn't seem that difficult. I don't know. And so we'll see I suspect Laird Veach knew he was going to be looking for a women's basketball coach after this year. So my guess is he had a list of people already in mind, even before Melissa announced her retirement. And so it'll be interesting to see who they end up going with, whether they, hire someone with local ties, whether they, try to get someone who's, completely unattached to Memphis type of thing. I don't know whether they hire an older coach or a younger coach. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing, but it's just good that program can finally turn the page and move on, if you will. And hopefully, in the coming years, we'll be talking about them as a relevant program again.
Yeah, I don't know if you have heard any names that might be kind of interested in the job or whatever, but I said in previous shows, and I sent Jason and John a text message regarding this when they talk about it. But the coach I'm interested in and want to basically come to Memphis. He's had a few local ties from when he was the head girls basketball coach here locally at Millington High School, and now he's the UT Martin women's basketball coach, Kevin McMillan.
Yeah, I've heard his name involved in it. I heard him. The Lipscomb coach, I don't know what her name is. She used to coach at Rhodes.
Lauren Avant, and I forgot her other last name, but she played at Rhodes, like you said. She went on to coach at Rhodes for
and she's really young. She's not even 30 maybe, but I've heard her name attached to it. No, I think they're going to have some options because, like I said, yes, the program has been pretty awful the past few years, but I think a decent coach can look at the situation. You got a renovated El Marone field house. You get to use this state-of-the-art practice facility that the men's team, the Lori Walton Basketball Center. Right. You've got all this talent right within a couple of, if you take you've got a lot of talent within a 3 or 4 hour drive of here, and even in just the city. And so the right coach, I think, can fix this thing pretty quickly. But it's about finding the right coach. And so we'll see what they end up doing, how much money they're willing to spend. I don't know.
And that's one reason I brought up Kevin McMillan, because, UT Martin's had a successful women's basketball team year in, year out. They might not make they made the NCAA tournament 1 year and almost beat Duke. And I think Kevin McMillan's going to be a good fit for the Memphis program because, one, he's got an assistant coach in Jasmine Newsom who played at Millington High School here, locally. And also, me personally, they got 3 or 4 local players on the UT Martin roster that's done pretty well for UT Martin. And I think Kevin McMillan, if he comes to Memphis, like you said, Mark, he can recruit the Martin area as well, and Martin, Jackson, national market pretty well. Even the Memphis region, they got some good talent, like you said, Mark. And I think we need a coach like that because he's been in the NCAA tournament year in, year out. And I know it's UT Martin, the Ohio Valley, but it's a decent program for women's basketball.
No, and to your point, I think they should hire someone with head coaching experience. I know there's some I wouldn't go the first-time head coach route with this program and the shape it's in. I want to prove someone who's done it before, who's built a program up before. And so it sounds like McMillan at UT Martin seems like a good fit. Same with the Lipscomb coach. Same with like I said, I would be trying to hire someone with previous head coaching experience, not a first-time head coach for this job, because I think it is. You have to fix some systemic issues, if you will, that have developed because this program hasn't won in a while. And so you want someone who's done it before.
And Mark, my last question for you would be the Grizzlies, since it's All-Star Weekend, a little bit in detail. Can you talk? How do you see I know the second half season is going to be brutal for the Grizzlies. Like you talked about in your show, they have 7 games back to back to back. It seems like
7-game road trip, longest road trip in franchise history.
Yeah, and then their back to back nights are gonna be crazy as well, from West Coast to Midwest to East Coast. It seems like. Just talk about the Grizzlies' first half of the season so far from a fan perspective as well.
I mean, I think you got to be happy with where they're at, given the circumstances. They're 16-16. They haven't had Jaren Jackson the entire time. They just got Justice Winslow back. I think they've had one game the entire season out of the 32 games they've played. So obviously Jaren's been out and Justice was out for most of them. But in addition to that, in all but one game, at least one other person on the roster has been out due to injury, and oftentimes multiple people. You've had Ja Morant miss 3 weeks at one point. So I think if you laid that out before the season to anyone and said, okay, you're not going to have Jaren the whole year. You're not going to have Ja Morant for a few weeks. You're not going to have Justice Winslow for all but like 5 games. You're also going to have, Jonas is going to have COVID, be out because of COVID. Grayson Allen's going to miss time because of COVID. Brandon Clark's going to miss some games. DeAnthony Melton's going to miss some games. If I laid all that out to you before the year and told you, but you're going to be 16-16 at the All-Star break, I think all 3 of us would be like, no, they're not. They're not going to be 16-16 if that happens. But here they are. And it is going to be brutal the second half of the year. I think it's 40 games in 68 days. And so now, but I will say, luckily, it'll probably be an issue long-term, the amount of guys that they have, the number of players that are viable options on this roster. But for this season, I mean, I do think the Grizzlies of all teams are set up to best handle this brutal schedule because they play so many guys. And you're going to get Jaren back. I think we're going to see Jaren soon after the All-Star break. And so I think they're set up pretty well to like we said before the year on our show, on our radio show, that my hope for this season was always like, have the games mean something till the end, and hopefully be in the play-in game, be in one of those play-in games. And here they are. I think they're 8th or 9th in the West right now, and that's exactly what they've put themselves in position to do, is be in the mix the whole season, and hopefully they'll play, get to the playing game. And the lucky thing is that if they do fall short of the playing game, getting a lottery pick is not the worst thing in the world for this group. Adding, potentially adding another talent around Ja and Jaren.
Cunningham from Oklahoma State, calling it now.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to get the number 1 pick to get him. So I don't know about that, but they're good. I mean, they're a competitive fringe playoff team. And I think they're still ahead, just like last year they were ahead of schedule. It feels like they're still ahead of schedule especially because they've been missing 2 major pieces most of the year. And you've seen, Ja, after a little lull there, Ja has closed the first half with a bang. Desmond Bane and Xavier Tillman, your 2 rookies, have looked really, look like rotation players, which is what all you can really ask for out of a rookie.
What you want right now. Yeah.
Jonas is averaging a double-double. Kyle Anderson's having the best year of his career. Grayson Allen was playing well before this concussion protocol. D'Anthony Melton has played, increasingly well lately. Brandon Clark, hasn't dropped off from last year. There's just a lot of good things going for this group. And they came into the All-Star break, playing well. And so, we'll see how they handle all of these games. But ultimately, I think you feel pretty happy about what the franchise is doing right now.
I would have to agree. I think that if you're a Grizzly fan, I mean, you've got to be excited. I mean, just looking at the talent on the court, plus the guys that they've got coming off the bench as well. I mean, it's really not a bad little basketball team. And man, Mark, they're fun to watch when they're hitting on all cylinders. That team.
Well, I think it's Josh. One more time. Josh just a crazy entertaining player. Like because it's just fun watching him because at any moment he could just have one of those like stretches where he's just electrifying. It's just so fun.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that concerns me with the Grizzlies is the only thing that concerns me is the defense lately. That's the only thing that really concerns me. I mean, we're scoring our points at will, but it's just the defense that concerns me lately. That's all.
Yeah, they went through a bad spell there defensively. Those last 4 or 5 games, though, the past 4 or 5, they've gotten back to playing better defense, I think. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're still a flawed team. Like they just are. They're not where they are not a Western Conference contender yet, nor should they be. But they're still in the year 2 of this rebuild. I don't think anyone, and so they're going to have flaws still. They're still probably, they probably still need another player long-term alongside John Jaren to really become a true contender, like an elite wing or a really good wing. But like for right now, they're on track, if not ahead of schedule still. And, they're giving us some compelling and entertaining basketball. And I think they're going to keep doing that the entire year.
Do you see us making a trade?
That's for sure.
I think they're going to be pretty quiet at the trade deadline. Maybe you'll see. Maybe Gorgie Jang will get traded, but I think that the Grizzlies, if you look at it, I think it's like next trade deadline, maybe, or this off season, or maybe even the following off season. I personally think, like, I've said this on the show. There's, to me, 3 ways that they can add this other player that I keep talking, that I said earlier that I think they're missing a guy. It's either they can do it signing a guy through free agency, which we've seen historically. It just doesn't, the Grizzlies, unfortunately, they've never really attracted an elite free agent to Memphis. Now maybe that changes because of because Ja is unlike anyone the Grizzlies have had before. But ultimately, I think that's like probably the least likely thing to happen. In terms of adding like a key piece. The second way is through the draft, which, we saw with Ja, let's say they fall just short of the playoffs this year, of the play-in this year, and they're in the lottery, and let's say they luck out and bump all the way up to number 3 or number 4 in the draft in the lottery. Well, right there in this draft, maybe you can add a, very good piece to go alongside John Jaren, potentially. And then the third way is via trade. And that's how I think they're ultimately going to do it. I think they, with all these draft picks and all these players, these young players that are around the same age, and a lot of them are the same position, all these things they've accumulated, I think they're accumulating them in order to make a big move. And the question is in my mind, is not if they make a big move, it's what the big move is and when it happens. And I don't think it's going to be this trade deadline, but it could be this coming off season. It could be next year's trade deadline. It could be the off season after that. But I think they're set, with all these draft picks and players that they've gotten over the past couple years. That's what I think they're setting up to do long term.
Hey, Wes, we should make a phone call to Blake Griffin.
Nice.
No.
No, I'm good. No, I don't want. don't want flopper. Mark, once again, thank you very much for everybody watching Facebook, YouTube, Twitch right now. We've got viewers on all three. We've been talking to Mark Gianotto, good friend from the Commercial Appeal. Also, Mark Gianotto and Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM radio, Memphis, Tennessee, from 2 to 4, Monday through Friday. Check them out. Great show. Really just a blast to listen to you and Jeffrey break down everything that y'all do on a daily basis, man. Mark Gianotto, thank you very much for being on the show with us again, man.
All right, guys, have a good weekend. Hopefully the Tigers can pull this one out tomorrow. It'd be a lot of fun if they did.
Absolutely, Mark. Thanks again, man.
It is going to be a lot of fun. Man. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Yeah, 11 a.m. CBS tomorrow. Check it out for the 4-Star Sports Show. Me, Jonathan, started it. Once again, Mark Gianotto, thank you very much, sir. We are out.